I was halfway through a business trip when my phone buzzed. Motion detected, living room. I checked the feed, expecting a glitch, but saw my parents measuring my walls like they owned the place. My mother laughed, saying that once they moved everything in, I would not dare make a scene. My blood turned to ice. They were not visiting. They were replacing me. Instead of screaming, I just smiled and set a trap they never saw coming. My name is Lauren Whitmore, and at 33 years old, I had cultivated a life of aggressively curated stability. I was a senior risk analyst for the Northbridge Compliance Group, a job that required a forensic eye for detail and an ability to predict where structural fractures might occur before the building actually collapsed. I spent my days in Denver conference rooms, telling CEOs with seven-figure salaries that their internal controls were failing. I was good at it. I was precise. I was the person you called when you wanted to ensure that no one was stealing from the company coffers. It was a bitter irony. Then, that while I was 2,000 miles away auditing the books of a mid-sized logistics firm, the most significant security breach of my life was happening in my own living room. It was 11 at night in Denver. The air in my hotel room was recycled and dry, carrying that faint, ubiquitous scent of industrial cleaning agents and stale coffee. I had just finished reviewing a stack of digital files, my eyes burning from the blue light of the laptop, when my personal phone buzzed against the nightstand. It was a single, aggressive vibration that rattled the glass of water I had placed there. I glanced at the screen. The notification was a simple banner across the locked display. Motion detected, living room. My first instinct was annoyance, not fear. I lived in Port Haven, a quiet coastal town where the crime rate was negligible. The sensors I had installed were sensitive. A shadow from a passing car or a spider crawling across the lens could trigger them. I picked up the phone, intending to dismiss it and go to sleep, but my thumb hovered over the notification. A second alert popped up immediately after the first. Sound detected, living room. Spiders did not make noise. Shadows did not have mass. I swiped the notification to open the app. The screen went black for a second, the little loading circle spinning in the center, buffering the feed. I sat up in bed, the hotel duvet falling to my waist. My heart rate kicked up a notch, a physiological betrayal of my calm exterior. When the image finally resolved, the pixelated gray of the night vision clicked into full color, illuminated by the lights inside my house. I was not looking at a burglar. I was not looking at a stranger in a ski mask. I was looking at my parents. For a moment, my brain refused to process the visual data. It tried to categorize this as a misunderstanding. Perhaps there was an emergency. Maybe a pipe had burst, and they had let themselves in with the spare key I gave them for catastrophes. But there was no water on the floor. There was no smoke. My father was standing near the bay window, holding a yellow metal tape measure. He was extending it across the width of the wall, the metal strip snapping taut as he locked it in place. He wore his casual weekend windbreaker, looking entirely at ease. My mother was by the bookshelf, my bookshelf, the one I had custom built to fit the alcove, and she was peeling the backing off a neon pink sticky note. She slapped the note onto the wood, then stepped back, crossing her arms to evaluate the space. I zoomed in on the screen, pinching the glass with trembling fingers. The camera was high definition, 4,000 pixels of clarity. I could see the label on the sticky note. It did not say clean. It did not say fix. It had a single word written in my mother's looping, cursive handwriting, storage. I felt a cold prickle of sweat break out on the back of my neck. They were not checking on the house. They were assessing it. I tapped the microphone icon to enable the audio. The sound quality was crisp, picking up the rustle of my father's jacket and the thud of the tape measure retracting. 12 feet, my father said, his voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room. If we angle it, the recliner should fit here, but the console table has to go. It takes up too much floor space. The console table is solid oak, Bob, my mother replied. She was moving my throw pillows, the ones I had spent weeks choosing to match the curtains, and tossing them onto the floor in a careless pile. We can put it in the garage for now, or sell it. Ethan won't want old lady furniture cluttering up his vibe. Hearing my brother's name was like taking a physical blow to the chest. Ethan, of course. What about the painting? My father asked, gesturing to the large abstract canvas hanging above the fireplace. It was the first piece of real art I had ever bought, a symbol of my first promotion at Northbridge. It is huge. It dominates the room. Take it down, my mother said dismissively. We will need that wall for the 70-inch TV he wants. I watched, frozen in the sterile silence of a Denver hotel room, as my parents dismantled my life. They walked through my sanctuary with the confident entitlement of landlords, treating my possessions as temporary obstacles to be cleared. They were not stealing my things. They were erasing them. They were editing me out of my own narrative to make room for the golden child who had never paid a mortgage bill in his life. I wanted to scream. I wanted to press the talk button on the app and let my voice boom through the living room speakers, demanding to know what they thought they were doing. My thumb hovered over the microphone icon again. The rage was hot and blinding, rising up my throat like bile. I wanted to shatter their comfort. I wanted to see them jump. But then, my mother spoke again, and her words froze the scream in my throat. She was standing in the center of the room, hands on her hips, looking around with a satisfied smirk. You know, she said, her voice dropping slightly, conspiratorial and smug. I was worried she would check the cameras, but she is so busy with that trip. By the time she gets back, the lease will be up on his apartment and the truck will be unloaded. She is going to flip out, my father grunted, though he didn't stop measuring. He was now sizing up the corner where my reading chair stood. My mother laughed. It was a soft, chilling sound. Let her flip. Once everything is moved in, she will just swallow it. You know how she is. She won't dare cause a scene, not with family. The audio cut out for a split second due to a connection dip, but the sentence hung in the air, vibrating in my ears. She won't dare cause a scene. My hand went slack. The phone slipped slightly in my grip. That sentence was not just a prediction. It was a weaponized understanding of my entire personality. They were banking on my propriety. They were betting on the fact that I was the responsible one, the stable one, the one who valued order and dignity over conflict. They knew I would never call the police on my own parents. They knew I would never throw their belongings onto the lawn in front of the neighbors. They were using my own maturity as the padlock on the cage they were building for me. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a hostile takeover. I sat there for a long time, watching the tiny screen. I watched my father stick a piece of blue painter's tape on the floor to mark where a new sofa would go. I watched my mother pick up a framed photo of me from the side table, one taken at my college graduation, and place it face down in a box she had brought with her. They looked so normal. That was the terrifying part. They did not look like villains. They looked like two loving parents helping a child move. It just happened that the child they were helping was a 30-year-old man-child, and the house they were giving him belonged to his sister. The nausea began to recede, replaced by something colder, something harder. It was the same feeling I got when I found a discrepancy in a ledger that someone had tried very hard to hide. The emotional hurt was still there, throbbing under the surface, but my mind began to compartmentalize. I was a risk analyst. I dealt in facts, in evidence, in worst-case scenarios, and I was looking at a worst-case scenario. If I called them now, the narrative would shift instantly. They would gasp, feign innocence, and claim they were just getting ideas or trying to surprise me. They would gaslight me until I felt crazy for accusing them. They would say I was selfish, that I was overreacting, that I hated my brother. They would sweep the tape measures and the boxes away, and the evidence of their intent would vanish. They would retreat, wait for 6 months, and try again more subtly. No, confrontation was a blunt instrument. I needed a scalpel. I hit the record button on the interface. A red dot appeared in the corner of the screen. I watched for 10 full minutes, capturing every angle, every measurement, every dismissive comment about my taste in decor. I recorded them discussing how they would convert my home office, my place of business, into a gaming room for Ethan. I recorded my mother saying that I could easily work from the dining table because I didn't have a husband or kids to distract me. I saved the clip, then I saved it again, uploading it to a secure cloud drive that was completely separate from the family shared plan I paid for. I emailed the file to my work address. I created a folder named Port Haven Incident, placing it inside a larger encrypted directory. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. I looked at the time. It was nearly midnight. I had a meeting at 8 a.m. with the VP of Operations. I needed to sleep. I needed to be sharp. But as I laid the phone face down on the nightstand, I knew sleep would be thin and fitful. I lay back against the pillows, staring at the dark ceiling of the hotel room. The silence here was absolute, a stark contrast to the busy scheming happening in my home 2 time zones away. My mother was right about one thing. I was not going to scream. I was not going to call them crying, begging for respect they clearly did not have for me. They believed that my silence was a sign of weakness. They believed that because I played by the rules, I was incapable of playing the game. They thought they could walk into my life, rearrange the furniture, and displace my existence, and that I would simply adjust to the new floor plan because I was Lauren, the good daughter, the one who fixed things. They were about to learn that compliance is not the same thing as submission. I closed my eyes. The image of that neon pink sticky note burned into my retinas. Storage. If they were so confident that I would remain silent, then I would give them exactly what they wanted. I would be silent. I would be so quiet that they would never hear the trap snapping shut until it was far too late to pull their legs out. In the taxonomy of the Whitmore family, I had always been classified as the oak tree. I was the solid thing, the structure that provided shade, the unmoving object that you could lean against when the wind blew too hard. My parents loved to tell their friends at the country club about my title, my salary, and my immaculate credit score. They wore my stability like a badge of honor, a testament to their parenting skills. "Look at Lauren," they would say. "Look how well she turned out. Look how independent she is." But standing in that hotel room, staring at the blank screen where the camera feed had just been, I finally understood the ugly truth about trees. You do not thank a tree for standing up. You do not ask a tree for permission to carve your initials into its bark. You simply use it, because it is there, and because it has never given you a reason to think it can move away. My brother, Ethan, was the wind. He was 30 years old, 3 years my junior, and he had spent the last decade buffering between catastrophes. Ethan was charming. He had a smile that could disarm a traffic cop and a laugh that made you want to hand him your wallet just to keep the good mood going. But he was allergic to accountability. His life was a series of unfinished symphonies. There was the year he was going to be a high-end landscape architect, which ended when he realized he had to wake up before noon. There was the craft brewery phase, which cost my parents $20,000 and resulted in nothing but a garage full of rotting hops. Then came the cryptocurrency obsession, the fitness app development, the organic dog treat business. Every failure was framed by my parents not as a lack of discipline, but as a deficit of luck. "Poor Ethan," my mother would say, sighing over her Chardonnay. "The market just turned on him." "He is a visionary," my father would add, nodding solemnly. "The world is just not ready for his ideas yet. He just needs a little more time, a little more runway." And I was the runway. I walked over to the hotel minibar and pulled out a bottle of water, cracking the seal with a sharp snap. I took a long drink, letting the cold liquid shock my system. I needed to be rational. I needed to trace the lines of this trap back to its origin, and as I did, I realized the trap had been set years ago. It was built out of small, seemingly harmless concessions. I remembered the first time. I was 24, just 2 years out of college, working entry-level audit. Ethan had totaled his car because he was texting while driving. My parents had called me, frantic. They did not have the liquidity for a down payment on a new one right then. They said, "Could I just handle the down payment? Just this once. It was for his safety. He needed a car to get to job interviews." I paid it, $2,000. It was a lot of money for me back then. I never saw it again. Then came the co-signing. Ethan needed an apartment in the city, but his credit report looked like a crime scene. "Lauren, you have great credit," my mother had pleaded. "It is just a signature. If you sign, he gets a roof over his head. You do not want your brother sleeping on a couch, do you?" So I signed, and 6 months later, when Ethan broke the lease to chase a girl to Austin, the landlord called me for the penalty fees. I paid those too. Over the years, the requests became a background radiation to my life. Cell phone bills, insurance premiums, emergency cash for car repairs that I strongly suspected were actually concert tickets. I paid because I was the capable one. I paid because it was easier than arguing. I paid because, deep down, a pathetic part of me believed that my generosity was buying me respect. I thought that if I solved their problems, they would see me as an adult, as an equal. I was a fool. I had not been buying respect. I had been training them. I had taught them that my resources were communal property. I had taught them that no was just a starting negotiation position. I sat down in the armchair by the window, looking out at the Denver skyline. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. My mind drifted back to Port Haven. Buying that house had been the single proudest moment of my life. It was not a mansion. It was a 3-bedroom colonial, built in the 1920s, with creaky floorboards and a porch that smelled of salt and cedar. Port Haven was an hour away from where my parents lived. A deliberate distance. I wanted a buffer zone. I wanted a place where the air belonged to me. I spent my weekends restoring it. I stripped the wallpaper myself. I sanded the floors until my shoulders ached. I curated every inch of that space to reflect who I was, not who my family wanted me to be. There was one room in particular, the smallest bedroom at the back of the house, overlooking the garden. It was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. Most people would have made it a guest room or a nursery. My parents had suggested a guest room immediately the first time they visited, but I had made it my library. It was not grand. I did not have mahogany shelves or leather chairs. It was simple. I had installed floor-to-ceiling white shelving. I had a comfortable velvet armchair in the corner, a good reading lamp, and a rug I had brought back from a trip to Morocco. It was the only room in the house where technology was forbidden. No laptop, no TV, no phone. It was the place I went to when the noise of the world became too much. It was where I decompressed after weeks of analyzing risk and hunting for fraud. It was the physical manifestation of my peace. I closed my eyes and recalled the camera feed I had just watched. The sticky note. My mother had placed that pink note on the door of my library. I had seen her do it in the wide shot before I zoomed in. And then I remembered the audio I had replayed in my head. "We can put the gaming setup in the back room," Ethan had said in a previous conversation I now recalled with clarity. A memory I had dismissed at the time as a joke. The one with the good light. The Wi-Fi signal is strong there. They were going to gut my sanctuary. They were going to take the books I had collected since college, box them up, shove them into a damp garage, and replace my peace with monitors, tangled wires, and the sound of my brother screaming at video games at 3 a.m. The violation felt physical. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my lungs. It was not just about the room. It was about what the room represented, to them. My library was wasted space. It was underutilized square footage, because I did not have a husband or children. My parents viewed my home as having a surplus of capacity that they were entitled to fill. They looked at my life and saw a vacuum that needed to be plugged with Ethan's needs. I realized then that I had made a critical error in my relationship with my family. I had equated stability with safety. I thought that if I built a strong enough wall, if I had enough money in the bank, if I lived a blameless, disciplined life, I would be safe from their chaos. But my stability did not repel them. It attracted them. It made me the perfect host organism. They did not see me as Lauren, the independent woman. They saw me as Lauren, the safety net. And safety nets are not supposed to have feelings. They are not supposed to have boundaries. They are just supposed to be there to catch the falling acrobat. no matter how many times he clumsily misses the trapeze. The anger that had been hot and frantic an hour ago began to cool into something heavy and dense, like lead. My mother's voice echoed in my head again. She won't dare cause a scene. She was banking on the habit of a lifetime. She was betting on the Lauren who smiled politely at family dinners, while Ethan made passive-aggressive jokes about my boring corporate job. She was betting on the Lauren who wrote checks to keep the peace. She was betting on the Lauren who valued the appearance of a happy family over the reality of her own dignity. I stood up and walked to the mirror in the hotel hallway. I looked at myself. I looked tired. There were fine lines around my eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. I was 33. I had spent my entire adult life trying to be the good daughter, the one who didn't cause trouble. And where had it gotten me? It had gotten me here, standing in a hotel room in Denver, watching my parents measure my walls for a hostile occupation. They thought the house was the asset. They thought the guest room and the big kitchen and the quiet neighborhood were the things they were stealing. But they were wrong. The real asset was my consent. The real asset was my willingness to play the role they had written for me. And that asset had just been liquidated. I picked up my phone again, but I did not call them. I did not text Ethan to ask why he was posting cryptic updates about new beginnings. I did not send a rage-filled email to my mother. I simply turned off the notifications for the camera app. I did not need to see any more. I knew exactly what they were doing. They were moving in. They were getting comfortable. They were building a nest in a tree they thought would never shake. They had mistaken my silence for permission. They had mistaken my stability for weakness. I went back to the bed and sat on the edge, opening the folder on my laptop where I kept my personal financial records. I created a new spreadsheet. I named it simply the ledger. If they wanted to treat my life like a business transaction, if they wanted to treat my home like a corporate acquisition, then I would oblige them. I would stop being the daughter. I would stop being the sister. I would become what I was best at. I would become the auditor. And I was going to audit the Whitmore family until the balance was zero. The realization settled over me with a strange sense of calm. The problem was not that Ethan needed a place to stay. If he had asked, if he had been humble, if he had respected me, I might have let him stay in the guest room for a month. The problem was that they believed my success was a communal pot from which they could draw whenever they pleased. They believed that because I had climbed the mountain, I was obligated to carry them up on my back, even if they refused to walk. Well, the free ride was over. I shut the laptop with a definitive click. The room was dark. Save for the city lights bleeding through the curtains, I lay down, staring into the shadows. I would let them paint the walls. I would let them move the furniture. I would let them think they had won. Because the higher they climbed, the harder the fall would be when I finally pulled the ladder away. The yellow legal pad on the hotel desk became my war room. I sat there for an hour, the room illuminated only by the harsh glow of the laptop screen and the city lights outside, drawing a line down the center of the page. On the left side, I wrote confrontation. On the right side, I wrote collection. It was the kind of binary choice I made every day in my professional life. When you catch a department head embezzling funds, you have two options. You can storm into their office, wave the papers in their face, and scream about integrity, or you can go back to your desk, quietly download every email they have ever sent, map out their entire network of accomplices, and wait until you have enough evidence to bury them so deep that not even a good lawyer can dig them out. My parents were not embezzlers in the legal sense, but emotionally, they were running a Ponzi scheme. If I chose confrontation, if I picked up the phone right now and called my mother, I knew exactly how the script would play out. She would gasp. She would sound wounded. She would say, "Lauren, honey, we were just brainstorming. We wanted to surprise you with some updates. Why do you always assume the worst of us? You are so sensitive." Then my father would get on the line. He would be the stern, disappointed patriarch. "Your brother is going through a hard time. Lauren, he needs family right now. Are you really going to be the kind of person who kicks a man when he is down, over a spare room you never use?" They would twist the reality until I was the villain. They would make me feel petty for wanting to keep my own house. They would weaponize my success against me, arguing that because I had more, I was morally obligated to give it to the one who had less. By the morning, the story would be circulating through the extended family that Lauren was selfish, cold, and had hysterical reactions to her parents just trying to help. I looked at the word confrontation and struck a thick line through it. They wanted a reaction. I would not give them one. Not yet. I turned to my laptop and pulled up the airline website. My original flight was scheduled for Friday evening. 3 days from now. I typed in my confirmation number. There was a flight leaving Denver at 6 in the morning. It would cost me $300 to change the ticket and another $50 for a preferred seat. I paid it without blinking. I did not text my assistant. I did not text my friends. And I certainly did not text the group chat named Whitmore Family that had been silent all day. 6 hours later, I was 30,000 feet over the Midwest. The cabin was dim, most passengers asleep with their shades drawn, but my overhead light was on. I had purchased the high-speed Wi-Fi package. I was not watching a movie or reading a book. I was building a case file. I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Truth. Then, I logged into my bank account. I filtered the search results by Ethan Whitmore. The screen populated with a long, scrolling list of transactions. Seeing them all in one place, devoid of the context of the sobbing phone calls or the frantic promises that accompanied them, was sobering. It was a hemorrhage. I opened a spreadsheet and began to enter the data. Date, amount, reason given, status of repayment. March, 4 years ago, $1,200. Reason: security deposit for the apartment in simplistic terms. Status: never returned. August, 3 years ago, $500. Reason: car repair. Claimed the transmission blew. Status: saw photos of him at a festival in Coachella the next day. December, 2 years ago, $3,000. Reason: legal fees for a DUI that they begged me to keep secret from the grandparents. Status: unpaid. It went on and on. The spreadsheet grew, row by row, a digital monument to my own enabling. I had always told myself it was not that bad. I told myself I was just helping out here and there, but looking at the total sum at the bottom of the column, I felt a wave of nausea. The number was not just a few thousand. It was enough to put a down payment on a second property. It was a luxury car. It was a year of travel. And it wasn't just the money. I began to dig through my email archives and text messages, searching for keywords: borrow, help, promise, swear, tomorrow. I found an email from my mother from 5 years ago. Lauren, please just handle this bill for Ethan. He is so close to a breakthrough with his music. If we pressure him now, it will crush his spirit. Just this once, honey. For me. Just this once. That phrase appeared in my search results 47 times. I took screenshots. I downloaded PDF statements. I categorized everything. I was treating my own life with the same clinical detachment I used for a failing corporation. I was building a timeline of manipulation. I realized something crucial as I cross-referenced the dates of the loans with my own life events. Whenever I had a major achievement, a promotion, a bonus, a new certification, there was almost immediately a crisis with Ethan. It was clockwork. It was as if my success sent a signal to them that the bank was open. They did not celebrate me. They audited me to see how much they could extract. The flight attendant came by with coffee. I took it black. My focus was absolute. I had the financial data. Now I needed the behavioral analysis. I needed to understand the scope of the invasion. My parents were physically in my house, yes, but Ethan was the beneficiary. What was he doing? I opened a private browser window and went to Instagram. I did not follow Ethan. I had muted him years ago to preserve my sanity. But his profile was public. He needed it to be public because he was always trying to be an influencer of some vague, undefined variety. His latest story had been posted 2 hours ago. I clicked the ring around his profile picture. The video was shaky, selfie style. Ethan was sitting in a car, my father's car. He was wearing sunglasses, bobbing his head to loud rap music. He pulled the glasses down and winked at the camera. "Big moves coming, fam," he said, his voice hyped up and artificial. "Finally getting the upgrade I deserve. No more cramped vibes. We are leveling up to the big leagues. Stay tuned for the house tour. It is going to be epic." I paused the video. The house tour. He wasn't just going to live there. He was going to content mine my home. He was going to use the aesthetic I had carefully built, the natural light in the living room, the curated bookshelf, the garden I had planted, as a backdrop for his personal brand of delusion. He was going to pretend he owned it. He was going to pretend he had earned it. I clicked to the next story. It was a photo of a moving truck rental confirmation. Overlaid on the image was a countdown clock sticker, T-2 days to the takeover. He called it a takeover. He wasn't even hiding it. I sat back in my narrow airline seat, the plastic tray table digging into my ribs. The anger was gone. In its place was a sharp, crystalline clarity. Ethan was a performer. He lived for the applause. He lived for the perception of success. He needed an audience to validate his existence. That was why he couldn't just move in quietly. He had to announce it. He had to build hype. He was setting a stage. And my parents were the stage crew, moving the props around, adjusting the lighting, making sure the star had his dressing room ready. They were so busy setting the scene that they had forgotten to check if the theater was actually empty. They thought the audience would be their friends, their enablers, the people on the internet who bought into the facade. They did not know that the critic was flying in early. I looked at the folder on my desktop named Truth. I had enough here to ruin him. I had enough to humiliate my parents. But simply showing them the spreadsheet wouldn't work. They would dismiss the numbers. They would say money wasn't everything. They would try to make it an emotional argument. So I had to make it a public argument. If Ethan wanted a show, I would give him a show. If he wanted to turn my home into a stage, I would make sure the spotlight was bright enough to reveal every crack in the foundation. I closed my laptop. The plane began its initial descent into the East Coast sunrise. Below me, the clouds were breaking, revealing the gray Atlantic Ocean. I was not going to call. I was not going to warn them. I was going to let them finish their setup. I wanted every box unpacked. I wanted every piece of furniture rearranged. I wanted them to be so comfortable, so deeply settled in their arrogance, that they would never see the trapdoor until they were already falling through it. I leaned my head against the cool plastic of the window. A small, cold smile touched my lips. "Break a leg, Ethan," I whispered to the glass. The show was about to begin. I sat in the driver's seat of a nondescript rental sedan, parked in the lot of a 24-hour diner about 10 miles outside of Port Haven. The engine was off, but the heat of my anger was enough to keep the windows from fogging up. My phone was mounted on the dashboard, the screen illuminating the dark interior of the car with the live feed from my living room. If the previous night had been the planning phase, today was the execution. The sunlight streaming through my bay windows was bright and cheerful, a stark contrast to the violation taking place inside. My parents had returned, and this time, they were not just measuring, they were tagging. My father moved through the hallway with a roll of blue painter's tape and a thick black marker. He looked like a general surveying a battlefield he had already conquered. He stopped at the antique mahogany console table I had bought at an estate sale 3 years ago. It was one of my favorite pieces, heavy and dark. The first real piece of furniture I had purchased that wasn't from a flat-pack box. He slapped a strip of blue tape across the polished wood surface. He wrote something on it in block letters. I pinched the screen to zoom in. Garage. He didn't even pause to consider the finish. He just slapped the adhesive down and moved on. Next was the runner rug in the hallway. Trash. Then the coat rack. Move. "We need to clear this whole corridor," I heard him say, his voice tinny through the phone speakers. "When the boys get here with the sectional, they are going to need a wide turning radius. This stuff is just in the way." The boys? My stomach tightened. They had called in reinforcements. The casual way he referred to the boys suggested this was not just my father and a dolly. They had hired movers, Or worse, they had recruited family friends, people I knew, people who would smile at me at Christmas parties while actively helping to dismantle my home. My mother walked into the frame. She was holding her cell phone to her ear, her other hand gesturing wildly at the walls. "Yes, exactly," she was saying, her voice bright and airy. "We want the vibe to be very open, very modern. We are getting rid of all this heavy, dark stuff. It is just too depressing for a young man. We want it to breathe." She paused, listening to the person on the other line. I could not hear the response, but her laugh was like a cheese grater against my nerves. "Oh, don't worry about that," she said, waving a dismissive hand at my collection of framed botanical prints. "We will have everything boxed up by the time you get here. Just pull the truck right up to the front lawn. The driveway might be tight, so just use the grass if you have to." Use the grass. I felt a vain throb in my temple. I had spent 2 summers rehabilitating that lawn. I had aerated the soil. I had watered it by hand during the drought. And she was inviting a moving truck to drive over it because she couldn't be bothered to navigate the driveway. She hung up the phone and turned to my father. "That was the delivery team from the furniture outlet. The new sofa and the entertainment center are arriving at 3 o'clock. "Good," my father grunted, peeling off another strip of tape. "That gives us 4 hours to clear the living room." "What about Lauren's books?" my mother asked, glancing toward the hallway that led to my library. "Box 'em," my father said. "We can stack them in the shed out back. If she wants them, she can sort through them later. Ethan needs that room clear for his streaming setup." "I will get the boxes," my mother said. "I think I saw some in the basement." They moved with such efficiency. There was no hesitation. There was no guilt. They weren't whispering. They weren't looking over their shoulders. They were moving with the absolute confidence of people who believed they were in the right. They truly believed that their son's comfort superseded my property rights. I tapped the screen, saving the clip. I had been recording for 20 minutes. I stopped the recording and immediately initiated the backup sequence. I uploaded the file to the cloud, then emailed it to a secondary account I had created just for this purpose. I named the file Evidence Day Tuage Clearance. I watched the progress bar inch across the screen. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. The most terrifying part wasn't the theft. It was the lack of fear. They weren't afraid I would say no. They weren't afraid I would call the police. The only thing they seemed concerned about was the logistics of the sofa delivery. They had calculated the risk. They had looked at my history. 33 years of being the good girl, the peacemaker, the one who swallowed her pride to keep the family dinner from turning into a brawl, and they had decided that the risk of me retaliating was 0. They thought the worst I would do is cry. They thought I would come home, see the new furniture, listen to their sob story about how Ethan really needs this fresh start, and I would sigh and accept it. They thought they were managing a compliant child. They did not realize they were activating a hostile witness. I disconnected the phone from the mount and opened my contacts. I didn't search for Mom or Dad. I typed in a name I had found during my research on the plane: Holloway and Finch Legal. They were a boutique firm in the next town over, known for aggressive property litigation and high-conflict estate disputes. They were expensive. They were ruthless. They were exactly what I needed. I hit the call button. "Holloway and Finch, how may I direct your call?" The receptionist's voice was professional, crisp. "My name is Lauren Whitmore," I said. My voice was steady, devoid of the tremors I felt in my hands. "I need to speak to an attorney regarding an urgent property dispute involving unauthorized access and impending asset destruction. I am prepared to pay a retainer immediately." There was a brief pause. The word retainer usually greased the wheels. "One moment, Ms. Whitmore. Let me put you through to Mr. Finch's paralegal." 5 minutes later, I had an appointment scheduled for 1 o'clock that afternoon. I had briefly outlined the situation: unauthorized occupants, intent to alter property, intent to move in third-party tenants without a lease. The paralegal had sounded intrigued. "Do you have proof of ownership?" she had asked. "I have the deed, the mortgage statements, and video evidence of the intrusion," I replied. And do you want to file for eviction? Not yet, I said, my eyes fixed on the dashboard clock. I want a cease and desist order drafted and ready to be served, and I want a trespass notice prepared for a Mr. Ethan Whitmore. But do not file them yet. I need to have them in hand. Understood, she said. We can have the paperwork drafted by the time you arrive. I hung up the phone. The clock read 10 in the morning. I had 3 hours before my appointment. I put the car in gear. My instinct was to drive straight to the house. I wanted to storm in there, rip the tape off the walls, and scream until my throat bled. I wanted to throw my father out the front door. I wanted to confront my mother and ask her how she could look me in the eye and tell me she loved me while treating my home like a storage unit for her golden child. But I knew better. If I went there now, I would lose the element of surprise. They would see my car in the driveway. They would have time to prepare their defense. They would put on their sad faces. They would guilt-trip me. They would make it about family. I needed to see the full extent of their plan. I needed them to commit fully. I needed the moving truck to be there. I needed the boys to be moving the furniture. I needed the scene to be absolute and undeniable, so that when I finally stepped into the light, there would be no room for them to backtrack and claim it was all a misunderstanding. I drove past the turnoff for my neighborhood. I took the long way around, circling the perimeter of the town. I found a spot on a side street, 3 blocks away from my house. It was close enough to walk, but far enough that my car wouldn't be spotted from the front window. I parked under the shade of a large oak tree. I reclined the seat back slightly so I wasn't visible to passing traffic. I opened the camera app again. They were in the kitchen now. My mother was opening the cabinets. She was taking out my ceramic plates, hand-thrown pottery I had bought from a local artist, and stacking them on the counter. "We can pack these up," she said to my father, who was taping up a cardboard box. "Ethan won't use these. He needs paper plates, or plastic, something that doesn't break when he drops it." "Right," my father said. "We will put these in the attic." They were erasing me, plate by plate, book by book. They were systematically removing every trace of Lauren Whitmore from the premises to create a blank canvas for Ethan Whitmore. I watched them for a long time. The anger that had been burning hot was starting to crystallize into something cold and sharp. For years, I had asked myself why. Why did they love him more? Why was my success never enough? Why did I have to buy their affection while he got it for free? I realize now that those were the wrong questions. You cannot ask why a parasite feeds on a host. It is simply its nature. It takes because it can. It takes because the host allows it. The question was no longer, why are they doing this? The question was, how do I make sure they never have the capacity to do this again? I watched my mother laugh as she tossed one of my linen napkins into the trash can. "We are doing him such a favor," she said. "He is going to be so happy here." I closed the app. "Yes," I whispered to the empty car. "He is going to be surprised. I can promise you that." I checked my watch. It was time to go see the lawyers. I started the engine, backed out of the spot, and drove away from my house. I left them to their tape and their boxes and their delusions. Let them work. Let them sweat. Let them drag the furniture across the floor. When I came back, I wouldn't be coming back as their daughter. I would be coming back as the landlord. And the rent was past due. The notification on my phone screen was a burst of neon color against the gray interior of the rental car. It was another update from Ethan. I had been refreshing his feed every 10 minutes, watching the narrative he was constructing in real time. He had posted a story. The text overlay was in bold, aggressive font. The reveal, tonight, new HQ. He was not tagging the location yet. He was playing the mystery card, building anticipation. In the video clip, he was holding a bottle of champagne that I knew cost $60, money he definitely did not have, and he was standing in front of a white wall. I knew that wall. I had painted it myself. It was the entryway to my home. "We are leveling up," Ethan shouted into the camera, the audio peaking with distortion. "From the basement to the penthouse. Baby, tonight we celebrate the empire. If you are day one, DM me for the address. VIPs only." I switched apps, opening the security camera feed. The reality inside my house was far less glamorous than the Instagram filter suggested, but it was far more infuriating. My living room had been transformed into a production set. The furniture, my furniture, had been shoved aggressively against the far walls. The center of the room was dominated by two large ring lights on tripods and a folding table draped in a black cloth, likely acting as a DJ booth or a bar. My parents were there, acting as the frantic stage crew. My father was currently stringing LED strip lights along the crown molding, using masking tape that I knew would peel the paint when removed. My mother was arranging plastic red cups in a pyramid formation on the dining table. They were not just moving him in, they were throwing him a launch party. Ethan was pacing the room, phone in hand, directing them. "Mom, move the plant. It is blocking the shot. I need the depth of field to look expensive." My mother, a woman who had once scolded me for leaving a coaster slightly off-center, immediately dragged my 6-foot fiddle-leaf fig tree across the hardwood floor. I winced as I imagined the scratches. "Is this better, sweetie?" she asked, breathless. "Yeah, whatever," Ethan muttered, not even looking up from his screen. "Just make sure the snacks don't look cheap. Plate them. Presentation is key to the brand." I set the phone down on the passenger seat. My hands were remarkably steady. A day ago, this sight would have made me cry. Now, it just felt like data. It was confirmation of the hypothesis I had formed on the plane. Ethan did not want a home. He wanted a backdrop. He wanted to project the image of a successful, self-made entrepreneur without doing a single minute of the actual work required to achieve it, and my parents were his willing accomplices, funding the set design with my assets. I could have called the police right then. I could have reported a burglary in progress. I could have triggered the alarm system remotely and watched them scramble like cockroaches when the lights turn on. But that would be too easy. It would give them an out. They would claim it was a misunderstanding, a surprise party for me, a joke gone wrong. They would minimize it. No, I needed witnesses. I needed the VIPs Ethan was inviting. I needed an audience. If Ethan wanted to perform, I was going to let him fill the theater before I walked onto the stage and burned the script. I put the car in drive and headed toward the commercial district of the town where I had booked my legal consultation. I had one stop to make before the main event. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour office supply store. Inside, under the humming fluorescent lights, I bought a single, heavy-duty document envelope. It was dark red, the color of a warning label. I spent the next 30 minutes at the self-service printing kiosk. I inserted a flash drive and began to print the contents of the folder I had named Truth. The printer whirred rhythmically, spitting out page after page of financial indictment. Page 1, the unauthorized credit inquiry. Page 5, the bank transfer history showing 5 years of loans. Page 12, the cease and desist letter drafted by Holloway and Finch, which I had picked up an hour ago. I organized them meticulously. I used paper clips to group the documents by category: fraud, theft, enabling. It was a physical manifestation of my resentment, a heavy, tangible brick of evidence that could not be gaslit away. I slid the stack into the red envelope and sealed it with the string closure. It felt satisfyingly heavy in my hand. I got back in the car and checked my messages. I had sent a text earlier to Maya Klein. Maya was a name that was rarely spoken in the Whitmore household. She was Ethan's ex-girlfriend from 3 years ago, a graphic designer who had been smart, funny, and tragically devoted to my brother's potential. They had broken up when Ethan drained their joint savings account to invest in a drop-shipping business that never shipped a single product. My parents had painted her as crazy and unsupportive, the villain who didn't believe in Ethan's dream. I knew better. My text to her had been simple. I am coming back to Port Haven tonight. Ethan is taking over my house. I am putting a stop to it. I thought you might want to be there. Her reply had come in 3 minutes ago. I am in. Meet me at the Starbucks on Main. I have something you need to add to your pile. I drove to the coffee shop. Maya was waiting at a corner table. She looked different than I remembered. Harder. Maybe. Her hair was cut into a sharp bob. and she was wearing a leather jacket that looked like armor. When she saw me, she didn't smile, but her eyes lit up with a grim sort of recognition. "Lauren," she said, standing up. She didn't hug me. We weren't friends, exactly. We were just two people who had survived the same natural disaster. "Maya," I nodded. "Thank you for coming." "I wouldn't miss this," she said, her voice low. "I saw his story. New HQ. I almost threw my phone across the room. He is telling everyone he bought the place." "I know," I said. "He thinks I am in Denver until Friday." Maya let out a short, sharp laugh. "He always was bad with calendars. Look, I don't have much time, but I dug this up when I got your text." She slid a manila folder across the table. "What is it?" I asked. "Open it," she said. I opened the folder. Inside was a collection of overdue notices and a final demand letter from a car dealership. But it wasn't just any car. It was for a luxury SUV leased 2 years ago. "Look at the cosigner," Maya said, pointing a manicured finger at the bottom of the page. I looked. My breath hitched in my throat. The signature read, "Lauren Whitmore." It was a clumsy forgery, the loops of the L too wide, the slant of the W wrong, but it was close enough to pass a casual inspection by a commission-hungry car salesman. "He used my information?" I whispered. The coldness in my chest deepened, freezing into absolute zero. "He used a copy of your driver's license," Maya explained. "The one Mom and Dad have in their safe. He told me you agreed to help him out because my credit was shot. I believed him. I drove that car for 3 months before the repo men showed up. That is when I found out you had no idea." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, looking up at her. "Your parents threatened to sue me for defamation if I contacted you," Maya said simply. "They said I was trying to tear the family apart. They paid the dealership a settlement to make it go away quietly. But the hit on the credit report? That is still floating around in the system if you look deep enough." I closed the folder and placed it on top of my red envelope. "My parents knew?" "Who do you think gave him the combination to the safe?" Maya said. She picked up her coffee cup, her eyes dark. "Burn them, Lauren. Burn it all down." "I intend to," I said. I left the coffee shop with Maya following in her own car. The sun had set, and the sky was a bruised purple turning to black. We drove in a silent convoy toward my neighborhood. As I turned onto my street, the first thing I noticed was the sound. Port Haven was a quiet town. After 9 o'clock, the loudest thing you usually heard was the ocean breeze or a cricket. But tonight, the bass from a subwoofer was rattling the windows of the houses 3 doors down from mine. I slowed the car, my headlights sweeping over the scene. It was worse than I had imagined. There were cars everywhere. They were parked in the driveway, double parked on the street. And yes, just as my mother had suggested, 2 sedans were parked diagonally across my front lawn, their tires grinding into the fescue grass I had nurtured for seasons. The house itself was ablaze with light. Every window was glowing. The front door was wide open. People, strangers, mostly, were spilling out onto the porch, holding red solo cups. I could hear the thumping beat of generic electronic dance music. I parked my rental car at the end of the block, shrouded in the shadows of a large elm tree. Maya pulled up behind me. I stepped out of the car. The night air was cool, but the atmosphere around my house was hot and chaotic. I stood there for a moment, just watching. I saw a guy in a backward baseball cap stumble out my front door and flick a cigarette butt into my azalea bushes. I saw a girl taking a selfie on my porch swing, using a flash that popped like a strobe light. And then I saw Ethan. He came out onto the porch, arms raised high, holding a bottle of vodka like a trophy. He was wearing a white t-shirt that was too tight, and he was shouting something to the crowd on the lawn. He looked triumphant. He looked like the king of the castle. "This is just the beginning," he screamed, his voice cracking slightly. "Whitmore Enterprises is taking over." The crowd cheered. It was a ragged, drunken cheer, fueled by free alcohol and the proximity to someone who pretended to be famous. My parents were there too. I saw my mother weaving through the crowd on the porch, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres, smiling that tight, desperate smile of hers, trying to play the gracious hostess at a frat party. My father was by the door, shaking hands with some of Ethan's business partners, looking important, looking like he had provided all of this. They were so happy. They were living the fantasy. I adjusted the collar of my blazer. I reached into the back seat and picked up the red envelope. I checked to make sure Maya's folder was securely tucked inside. Maya walked up beside me. She looked at the house, then at me. "Ready?" she asked. "No," I said calmly. "I'm not ready. I am overdue." I started walking down the middle of the street. My heels clicked against the asphalt, a sharp, rhythmic sound that was lost under the bass of the music. I didn't rush. I walked with the measured pace of an executioner climbing the scaffold. I watched the house. I watched the people drinking my wine and sitting on my chairs. I watched my brother preening like a peacock on my porch. "Kudindi," I thought, the phrase echoing in my mind like a mantra. Keep acting. Keep smiling. Enjoy the spotlight. Because the best thing about a spotlight is that it doesn't just show the star. It illuminates the dirt. It illuminates the lies. And I was bringing the script that would reveal the ending they never wrote. I reached the edge of my driveway. The music was deafening now. A few people on the lawn turned to look at me, confused by the woman in the sharp business suit standing alone in the dark. I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes locked on Ethan. It was time to go home. The music was a physical wall. It vibrated against my chest as I walked up the driveway, a heavy, distorted thumping that rattled the windows of my own home. I could smell the cheap, sweet scent of vaping liquid mixed with the stale odor of spilled beer before I even reached the porch steps. A stranger was sitting on my railing, his legs dangling over my hydrangeas, crushing the blooms I had nursed through a difficult spring. He looked at me, scanning my blazer and heels with a glazed, confused expression. But I did not stop. I did not ask him to move. I simply walked past him, my shoulder brushing his arm, and pushed open the front door. The air inside was hot and thick. The open-concept living room, the one I had designed for quiet evenings and reading, was unrecognizable. The furniture had been shoved against the walls to create a makeshift dance floor. The rug was gone, rolled up and shoved into a corner like a dead body. In the center of the room, under the harsh, white glare of two massive ring lights, my brother was holding court. He was shouting something into a microphone connected to a portable speaker, but the words were lost in the noise. He looked sweaty, manic, and entirely in his element. He was the captain of a ship he had not built, steering it straight into an iceberg while the passengers cheered. I took 3 steps into the room. My mother was the first to see me. She was standing near the kitchen island, holding a tray of shrimp cocktails that looked suspiciously like the frozen kind from the discount warehouse. She froze. The tray tilted dangerously in her hands. Her eyes went wide, not with relief, not with joy, but with the panicked calculation of a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar. She dropped the tray. It clattered onto the countertop, a sharp noise that cut through the baseline for the people standing nearby. "Lauren?" she mouthed. The word was swallowed by the music, but I read her lips. She rushed toward me, wiping her hands on her apron. It was a frantic, scurrying motion. She reached me before I could get to the center of the room, her hands fluttering up to touch my arms, as if to physically hold me back. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. Her voice was pitched high, struggling to be heard over the noise. "You are in Denver. You are supposed to be working." She made it sound like an accusation. She made it sound like my presence in my own home was a breach of contract. "I finished early," I said. My voice was low, level, and completely devoid of warmth. "I came home." "You should have called," she said, her fingers digging into my sleeve. She was trying to steer me toward the hallway, away from the lights, away from the crowd. We were just having a little get-together, a welcome party for Ethan. We didn't want to bother you while you were busy." "A get-together," I repeated, looking over her shoulder at the 50 strangers trashing my living room. "It is a networking event." My father appeared on my other side. He looked flushed, a glass of scotch in his hand. My scotch, from the bottle I had been saving for a special occasion. "Lauren, keep your voice down. These are important people, potential investors." "They are drinking vodka out of red plastic cups, Dad," I said. "They are not investors. They are freeloaders." "Don't be difficult," he snapped, his jovial host mask slipping for a second to reveal the authoritarian father beneath. "Ethan has worked hard to set this up. Do not embarrass him. We can talk about this later. Go upstairs. Go to your room. We will clean everything up in the morning." Go to your room. I was 33 years old. I paid the mortgage on the floorboards he was standing on, and he was sending me to my room like a petulant teenager. I pulled my arm out of my mother's grip. It was a sharp, violent motion that made her gasp. "No," I said. I walked past them. They were too stunned to stop me. I walked straight into the center of the room, right into the blinding wash of the ring lights. Ethan was there. He was holding his phone on a stabilizer gimbal, live streaming to his followers. He was laughing at something a girl in a sequined dress had just said. When he saw me, his smile faltered for a fraction of a second. I saw the panic flare in his eyes, the realization that the landlord had returned. But Ethan was a performer. He recovered instantly. He widened his grin, turning the camera toward me. "And look who it is," he shouted into the microphone, his voice booming through the speakers. "The sister, the myth, the legend. Lauren made it back from her big corporate trip just in time to celebrate the launch." He threw an arm around my shoulder, pulling me into the frame. He smelled of alcohol and desperate ambition. "Say hi to the stream. Lauren, tell them how proud you are of the new HQ." The chat on his screen was scrolling fast. "Sister reveal. She looks mad. LOL." I looked at the phone. Then I looked at Ethan. I did not smile. I did not wave. I reached up and removed his arm from my shoulder. I did it slowly, deliberately, like I was removing a piece of lint. "No," I said. My voice was not loud, but the microphone picked it up. It cut through the hype like a razor. Ethan laughed nervously. "She is shy, guys. She is a behind-the-scenes kind of girl." I stepped forward, moving fully into the center of the frame, blocking him. I looked directly into the camera lens. "I do not agree to this," I said clearly. "I did not agree to this party. I did not agree to this move. And I certainly did not agree to my home being used as a prop for a fraud." The room went quiet. It wasn't instant silence. It rippled out from the center. People stopped dancing. The girl in the sequined dress took a step back. The music seemed to grow louder in the awkward vacuum of conversation, thumping inappropriately against the sudden tension. Ethan reached for the phone, trying to turn the camera away. Okay, bad connection. Guys, we will be right back." I caught his wrist. I didn't squeeze, but I held it firm. "Leave it on," I said. "You wanted an audience. You have one." I turned to the room. I looked at the faces of the strangers drinking my liquor. I looked at my parents, who were standing by the kitchen, pale and horrified. "My name is Lauren Whitmore," I said, projecting my voice to the back of the room. "I am the sole owner of this property. I did not authorize this event. I do not know who any of you are." Someone near the back booed. "Buzzkill!" I didn't flinch. I walked over to the folding table where the DJ equipment was set up. I reached out and pulled the power cord from the socket. The silence was sudden and violent. The ringing in my ears was the only sound left. "If you do not live here," I said, my voice ringing out in the quiet room, "you are trespassing. You have 5 minutes to vacate the premises before I call the local police department and file charges for breaking and entering." "Lauren!" my mother shrieked. It was a sound of pure social mortification. "You can't do that. These are guests." "They are intruders," I corrected her. "And so are you." I reached into my bag and pulled out the red document envelope. I slammed it onto the coffee table, or what was left of the coffee table under a pile of empty cans. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Get out," I said. The crowd stood frozen for a second. unsure if this was part of the show. Then, the girl in the sequins put down her drink. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door without a word. That broke the spell. The herd mentality shifted from party to flee. People began to shuffle toward the exit, casting awkward glances at Ethan and me. The sound of murmuring filled the room. Confused, annoyed, amused. Ethan stood there, his face draining of color. The live stream was still running, capturing the exodus of his VIPs. He looked at the phone, then at me. He tapped the screen frantically, ending the broadcast. He walked up to me. He was trembling. He came in close, invading my personal space, dropping his voice to a menacing whisper that the others couldn't hear. "What are you doing?" he hissed. His eyes were wet, not with tears, but with rage. "You are embarrassing me. You are humiliating Mom and Dad. Do you have any idea how hard I worked for this? You are ruining my life. Lauren, you are actually ruining my life." It was the same line he had used since we were children. "You ruined my game. You ruined my chance. You ruined my fun." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had stolen my credit, forged my signature, and turned my sanctuary into a circus tent. "I am not ruining your life, Ethan," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I am just handing you the bill." "I will fix this," he whispered, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "I will tell them you are crazy. I will tell them you are off your meds. I will spin this." "You can try," I said, "but you might want to look at what is in the envelope first." I pointed to the red folder on the table. "You ruined your own life a long time ago," I said. "Tonight is just the night everyone else gets to see the wreckage." My father marched over, his face purple with exertion. "Lauren, apologize to your brother immediately. Look at what you have done. You cleared the room. You are acting like a hysterical child." "I am acting like a landlord," I said. I looked at my watch. "The guests have 3 minutes left. After that, I am calling Sheriff Miller. And Dad? You know he doesn't like loud noises after 10. My father sputtered. "You wouldn't—" "Try me," I said. I crossed my arms and leaned against the wall where my bookshelf used to be. I watched the last of the strangers filter out the door. The room was emptying, leaving only the smell of stale beer and the four of us standing in the wreckage of their delusions. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a bomb that had finished detonating. "Now," I said, looking at my family. "Sit down. We have some paperwork to review." The red envelope sat on the beer-stained coffee table like a physical weight, pressing down on the sudden, suffocating silence of the room. The last of the party guests were still shuffling out the front door, casting curious, backward glances. But the core audience, my mother, my father, and Ethan, remained trapped in the gravitational pull of what I was about to do. I did not scream. Screaming implies a loss of control, and for the first time in my life with this family, I was the only one who had total control. I reached out and slowly unwound the string closure of the envelope. The sound of the stiff paper uncoiling was sharp and distinct, like the cocking of a pistol. I slid the stack of documents out. They were warm from the printer, crisp and white against the dark wood of the table. "What is this?" my father asked. His voice was blustery, trying to regain the authority he usually wielded by volume alone. "You kick out our guests. You embarrass your brother. And now you want to show us paperwork? Have you lost your mind? Lauren?" "On the contrary," I said, my voice level. "I have finally found it." I picked up the first sheet. It was a summary spreadsheet, a timeline I had compiled on the plane. I didn't look at them. I looked at the data. "October, 5 years ago," I began, reading the entry as if I were in a boardroom presentation. "Transfer of $3,000. Reason given, Ethan needed a specialized laptop for his graphic design career. Outcome, the laptop was sold at a pawn shop in January. The money was never returned." "That was a misunderstanding," Ethan said quickly, his laugh nervous and thin. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, trying to look bored, but his eyes were darting between the paper in my hand and the door. "I told you. I got ripped off by a client. I ignored him. I flipped the page. February, 4 years ago. I continued. Payment of $1,500 to a mechanic in Jersey City. Reason given. Transmission failure on the car mom and dad bought you. Reality. Speeding ticket and impound fees for reckless driving. Status, unpaid. My mother bristled. Lauren, that is ancient history. Why are you bringing up old dirt? We are a family. We help each other. Do we? I asked, looking up at her, because I seem to be the only one doing the helping, and Ethan seems to be the only one doing the taking. I picked up a stack of printed screenshots. These were the texts, the digital breadcrumbs of their manipulation. Let's look at the methodology, I said. It is a cycle. Ethan has a crisis. You panic. You call me. You use specific trigger words. I read from the paper, my voice devoid of inflection. Text from Mom. Dated June 12th. Lauren, please. He is in a dark place. If we don't fix this debt, I am afraid of what he might do. Just this once. I dropped the paper and picked up another. Text from Dad. Dated August 3rd. Your brother needs a win. He just needs a little capital to get this app off the ground. Don't be selfish. You have that bonus coming in. Just this once. I looked at them. I did a word search for the phrase, just this once, in our message history. Do you know how many times it appears? I waited. They didn't answer. 47 times, I said. 47 times in 5 years. That is not an emergency. That is a subscription service. You are rich, my father shouted, slamming his hand down on the kitchen counter. The vein in his neck was throbbing. You have a high-paying job. You have no kids. You have this big house all to yourself. What are you hoarding it for? It is your duty to lift up your brother when he stumbles. There is a difference between lifting someone up and letting them stand on your neck, I replied. And there is a difference between charity and theft. It is not theft, Ethan snapped. He pushed off the wall, stepping toward me aggressively. I was going to pay you back. I am always going to pay you back. You just never give me enough time. Time is not the issue. Ethan, territory is. I reached for my phone. I had connected it to the large television screen mounted above the fireplace, the one they had planned to replace with a bigger one for Ethan's gaming. I tapped the screen, casting the video file I had named Evidence Day 1. The screen flickered to life. The high-definition security footage played in stark clarity. My parents and Ethan fell silent as they watched themselves. On the screen, my father was walking through the living room, the very room we were standing in, holding a tape measure. My mother was peeling the sticky note that said, storage, and slapping it onto the door of my library. I let the audio play. When everything is moved in, she will just swallow it. She won't dare make a scene. The voice of my mother on the recording was smug, conspiratorial, and utterly dismissive. It echoed in the room, bouncing off the walls she had planned to repaint. I watched my mother's face. She went pale. Her hand went to her mouth. It is one thing to say something cruel in private. It is another thing entirely to hear your own cruelty played back to you in front of a witness. I fast-forwarded the clip. Ethan won't want old lady furniture cluttering up his vibe. The recording continued. Take it down. We will need that wall for the 70-inch TV. I paused the video on the frame where my father was marking my favorite painting for removal. You weren't visiting, I said, pointing at the screen. You weren't planning a surprise. You were measuring my life for a coffin. The last few stragglers who had been lingering near the door, hoping to see the drama unfold, suddenly decided that this was too heavy for them. I saw them slip out, closing the door softly behind them. The room felt smaller now, tighter. Ethan looked at the screen, then at me. The arrogance was slipping. He looked like a child who had been caught trying to steal the answer key to a test, but he was cornered, and cornered animals bite. You are insane, he muttered. You recorded us? You were spying on us? That is illegal. Lauren, that is sick. It is my house, I said. I can record whatever I want, and what I recorded was a conspiracy to commit constructive eviction. Oh, Stop using those big lawyer words, my mother snapped. Though her voice was trembling, tears were starting to form in her eyes, her go-to defense mechanism. We were just trying to help Ethan get on his feet. He has had such bad luck. And you are so cold. I raised you better than this. I raised you to care about family. You are being ungrateful. You are being a bad daughter. The words hung in the air. Bad daughter. The ultimate weapon. The phrase designed to make me fold. To make me apologize. To make me write the check just to stop the guilt. But looking at the spreadsheet on the table and the video on the screen, the guilt didn't come. Ungrateful? I repeated. I took a step toward her. She flinched. Ungrateful is what you call a child who refuses to be consumed, I said. You think I owe you this house because you raised me? You think my success is just a dividend you are entitled to collect? I paid for this house with my labor. I paid for this furniture with my time. And I have paid for Ethan's mistakes with my future. I picked up the red envelope again. You say I am ungrateful. I say I am done. You can't kick him out, my father growled. He has nowhere to go. He gave up his lease because we told him he could stay here. That sounds like a management error, I said coldly. I suggest you file a complaint with the people who made that promise, because it wasn't me. He is your brother, my mother wailed. He is blood. He is a 30-year-old man who is trying to evict me from my own life, I said. And you are the ones holding the door open for him. Ethan let out a scoff, trying to regain some ground. You are bluffing. You are not going to call the cops. You are not going to sue us. You care too much about what people think. You are terrified of a scandal. He grinned, a flash of the old manipulative Ethan. Go ahead. Show everyone the spreadsheet. I will tell them you are a neurotic control freak who charges her own brother for coffee. Who do you think they will believe? The cool entrepreneur or the bitter spinster sister? I looked at him. He really believed that. He really believed that charm outweighed facts. He really believed that my silence was permanent. You are right, Ethan, I said softly. I don't want a scandal. His grin widened. He thought he had won. He thought I was folding. But, I added, I am not the one who should be worried about what people think. I looked toward the front door. I didn't come alone. Ethan frowned. What? I said, I brought a witness. Someone who knows a lot more about your entrepreneurial habits than I do. My mother looked confused. Who? There is no one else here. Not yet, I said. But she is right outside. As if on cue, the motion sensor light on the porch flickered on. A shadow fell across the frosted glass of the front door. I looked at my brother. For the first time all night, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He knew that look on my face. It was the look I had when I found the discrepancy in the ledger that sent a CEO to prison. You said you wanted a reveal. Ethan, I said, walking toward the door. You said you wanted to level up. Well, let's see how you handle the next level. I reached for the handle. Lauren, don't, my father warned, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. I didn't listen. I turned the lock. Happy housewarming, I said. And I pulled the door open. The silence in the room was not empty. It was heavy, pressurized, like the air in a submarine right before the hull breaches. Maya Klein stepped across the threshold, her boots making a sharp, deliberate sound on the hardwood floor. She did not look at the chaos around her, the overturned red cups, the moved furniture, the tangle of wires. She looked straight at my brother. Ethan's face went from flush to the color of wet ash. Maya, he choked out. It wasn't a greeting. It was a plea. What are you doing here? This is a private family event. It stopped being private when you posted the address on the internet, Maya said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. She didn't sound angry. She sounded like a coroner arriving at a scene she had expected to visit for a long time. My mother stepped forward, her maternal instinct kicking in to defend the cub, even though she was clearly confused. Excuse me? You are not welcome here. I remember you. You are the girl who tried to hold Ethan back. You were always so negative. Maya ignored her completely. She walked past my mother as if she were a piece of the displaced furniture and stopped in front of the coffee table. She placed a thick manila envelope right next to my red one. "Lauren," Maya said, turning to me, "I showed you the car lease at the coffee shop, but I found something else while I was digging through the joint cloud account he forgot to remove me from." She tapped the envelope. "You need to see this, and so do they." I picked up the envelope. My hands were cold, but steady. I pulled out a stapled document. It was a loan agreement from a predatory online lender, the kind that advertises on late-night television with screaming fonts and fine print that ruins lives. I scanned the top of the page. Borrower: Lauren Whitmore. Co-borrower: Ethan Whitmore. Loan amount: $25,000. Interest rate: 28%. I looked at the date. It was dated 3 days ago, the day I left for Denver. My eyes dropped to the bottom of the page. There, above the line marked Guarantor, was a scrawl of black ink. It was my name, but it was not my signature. The L was too looped. The W lacked the sharp peaks I had used since high school. It was a tracing, a shaky imitation done by someone who had seen my signature 1,000 times but never practiced the muscle memory of it. "He submitted this electronically," Maya said, her voice cutting through the room. "He used a photo of your passport he had on his phone from that family trip to Cabo 2 years ago. The funds were deposited into a new checking account yesterday morning." I looked up at Ethan. He was backing away, his hands raised in a pathetic surrender motion. "It is just a bridge loan," he stammered, his voice rising in pitch. "It is temporary. I needed liquidity for the launch party, for the branding. The investors are coming in next week. Lauren, I swear, I was going to pay it off in full before the first statement even arrived. You wouldn't have even known." "I wouldn't have known?" I repeated, the words tasting like copper in my mouth. "You took out a high-interest loan in my name, effectively stealing $25,000 from a shark, and you thought I wouldn't know?" "I was doing it for us," Ethan shouted, desperate now. "For the family name. Once the company takes off, 25,000 is nothing. It is pocket change." "It is fraud," I said. "It is a felony. Ethan, you committed identity theft against your own sister." My father stepped in, his face red and sweating. "Now, hold on. Let's not use words like felony. Ethan made a mistake. He was overzealous. He shouldn't have signed your name. Sure, but he had a plan to pay it back. He is an entrepreneur. Sometimes you have to take risks." "He didn't take a risk, Dad," I said, holding up the paper. "He forced me to take one, and he didn't ask." "We can fix this," my mother said, her voice trembling. She reached out to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "We can just pay it back. Your father and I have some savings. We will pay the loan, and then it goes away. No harm done. We don't need to ruin his reputation over paperwork." Maya laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You think this is it?" Maya asked. She looked at my parents with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You think he stopped at his sister?" My father froze. "What do you mean?" Maya reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out another sheet of paper. It was a printout of a credit monitoring alert. "Ethan has been using the same password for everything since college," Maya said. "It was not hard to check his history. He has been cycling through credit applications for the last 6 months. Most were rejected." She turned to my father. "But last week, one was approved. A business line of credit for $10,000. My father let out a breath. "Well, that is his business. That has nothing to do with—" "The cosigner listed is Robert Whitmore," Maya interrupted. "Social Security number ending in 4589. The room went dead silent. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He patted his chest pocket, fumbling for his phone. His face had gone from red to a sickly, pale gray. "I didn't sign anything," my father whispered. "I didn't authorize a line of credit." "You didn't have to," Maya said. "He has your tax returns in the filing cabinet in your home office. He knows your mother's maiden name. He knows the name of your first pet. He knows everything he needs to become you on a screen." as if choreographed by a cruel director. My father's phone chimed. It was the sharp, distinctive ping of an email notification. He looked at the screen. He squinted, his hand shaking so hard the phone vibrated against his palm. "What is it, Bob?" my mother asked, her voice barely a whisper. My father looked up. He looked old. Suddenly, he didn't look like the stern patriarch who commanded respect. He looked like a man who had just realized the foundation of his house was made of sand. "It is a fraud alert," he said, his voice hollow. "From the bank. Someone tried to transfer $4,000 from our retirement savings account to an external wallet 30 minutes ago." He looked at Ethan. "30 minutes ago," my father repeated, "while we were standing right here, while you were streaming your party." Ethan flinched. "Dad, I can explain. The vendor needed a deposit for the catering immediately or they were going to leave. I was going to put it back tomorrow when the loan cleared. I just needed to bridge the gap." "You tried to drain our retirement?" my mother gasped. She put a hand on the counter to steady herself. "Ethan, we are retired. That is all we have." "I wasn't stealing it," Ethan screamed, tears finally spilling down his face. Tears of frustration, not remorse. "Why does no one believe me? I am trying to build something here. I am trying to make us all rich. You are all so short-sighted. You care about a few $1,000s now, but you don't see the millions coming down the road." "There are no millions." "Ethan," I said. My voice was quiet, but it seemed to fill the room. "There is no company. There is no product. There is no plan. There is just you, playing dress-up with our money." I pointed to the papers on the table. "You aren't an entrepreneur," I said. "You are a parasite, and you have finally run out of blood." My mother looked at Ethan. For the first time in my life, I saw the veil lift. For 30 years. She had looked at him and seen a golden boy who was just unlucky. She had seen a victim of circumstance. She had seen a genius waiting for his break. Now, she looked at him and saw a man who had forged his sister's signature and raided his parents' nest egg to pay for a DJ and red plastic cups. She looked at the VIP setup, the ring lights, the empty bottles, the trash on the floor. It didn't look like a launch party anymore. It looked like a crime scene. "Ethan," my mother said. Her voice broke. "Tell me you didn't touch the retirement account." "It was just a transfer," Ethan yelled. "I have the money coming. Why is everyone acting like I'm a criminal?" "Because you are," my father said. The anger was gone from his voice, replaced by a deep, crushing defeat. "You are a criminal, son." Ethan looked around the room. He looked at Maya, who stood like a stone statue of judgment. He looked at me, the sister he had underestimated for decades. He looked at his parents, the safety net he had just slashed with his own knife. The stage was gone. The audience had left. The lights were still on, but they weren't illuminating a star anymore. They were illuminating a thief. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor, surrounded by the scuff marks his party guests had left on my hardwood. He put his head in his hands. "You ruined it," he sobbed into his palms. "I almost had it. I was so close." I looked down at him, even now, at the end of everything. He was mourning the con, not the relationship. I turned to Maya. "Thank you." Maya nodded once. "I didn't do it for you, Lauren. I did it so he couldn't do to anyone else what he did to me." She turned and walked out the door, leaving the four of us in the wreckage of the Whitmore family myth. I looked at my father, who was staring blankly at his phone. I looked at my mother, who was weeping silently, her hand covering her mouth. "I think," I said, picking up the red envelope and the new evidence Maya had brought, "that we are done with the party portion of the evening. Now we move on to the eviction." The silence that descended upon my living room was not the peaceful quiet of a library. It was the hollow, ringing silence of a crash site after the metal has stopped twisting. The last few guests, a couple of guys in oversized hoodies who had been lingering by the kitchen island hoping for one last free drink, looked at the expression on my face. then at the weeping woman and the shell-shocked man, and decided that the free alcohol was no longer worth the price of admission. They set their red plastic cups down on my granite countertop, the hollow thwack of plastic on stone echoing like a gavel strike, and slipped out the front door without a word. I did not chase them. I did not yell. I simply stood by the open door, my hand resting on the brass knob, holding it open like a portal between the fantasy world my brother had constructed and the cold, hard reality of the night outside. "If you do not live here," I said, my voice low but carrying to the corners of the room where shadows were starting to reclaim the space. "Invitation revoked. Please leave, now." It was not a threat. It was an administrative fact. The house emptied. The DJ, a skinny kid who looked no older than 19, was already hurriedly coiling his cables, terrified by the mention of the police. He lugged his speakers out to a van parked on the lawn, leaving behind muddy boot prints on the hardwood I had spent 3 weekends refinishing. When the latch of the front door finally clicked shut, the sound was final. I turned the deadbolt. Click. I walked over to the center of the room. The 2 massive ring lights were still blazing, casting a harsh, clinical glare that made everyone look pale and sick. They were the lights of an interrogation room, not a party. I reached down and unplugged the extension cord. The room plunged into semi-darkness, illuminated only by the warm, yellow glow of the recessed hallway lights. The shift in lighting stripped away the last layer of Ethan's stage. Without the bright white wash, the VIP lounge was just a messy living room filled with trash. The CEO sitting on the floor was just a man in a stained t-shirt. Ethan looked up. His eyes were red, but the manic energy was gone, replaced by a sullen, terrified exhaustion. He looked around the empty room as if waiting for the applause track to cue up, but there was nothing. No comments scrolling on a screen, no friends hyping him up, just the people he had robbed. For the first time in 30 years, the dynamic in the room shifted. Usually, when a crisis hit, my parents formed a protective phalanx around Ethan, shielding him from consequences while pointing their fingers at the world, or at me, for being too harsh. But tonight, the shield had shattered. My father was the first to speak. He was staring at his phone screen, reading and rereading the fraud alert from his bank. His hand was trembling. "You tried to take the retirement money," my father whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a realization that was breaking his heart in real time. "We gave you everything, Ethan. We paid for the car. We paid for the apartment. We paid for the lawyers. And you tried to steal the nest egg?" "I didn't steal it," Ethan shouted, but his voice cracked, lacking its usual conviction. "I was going to put it back. You guys don't understand cash flow. I just needed it for 48 hours. "You logged into my account," my father said, his voice rising to a roar that I had never heard directed at his son before. "You used your mother's maiden name to bypass the security questions. That is not borrowing. Ethan, that is hacking. That is theft." "I am your son," Ethan screamed back, scrambling to his feet. "Everything you have is going to be mine eventually anyway. Why does it matter if I take it now when I actually need it?" The words hung in the air, toxic and revealing. My mother let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. She looked at Ethan as if he were a stranger wearing her son's face. "Is that what you think? That we are just waiting to die so you can cash out?" "No, Mom, I didn't mean it like that." Ethan backpedaled, seeing he had gone too far. He reached out to her. "I just meant, we are a team. The family money is for the family, right? And I am the one who is trying to build a legacy with it. Lauren just sits on her money. She hoards it. I am trying to multiply it." "You aren't multiplying anything," my father spat. "You are subtracting. You have subtracted every cent we have ever given you." He turned away from Ethan, disgusted, and walked over to the window, staring out at the darkness. It was the first time I had ever seen him turn his back on his son. My mother stood in the middle of the room, looking lost. She looked at my father's back, then at Ethan's desperate face, and finally, her eyes landed on me. I was standing by the fireplace, watching them. I felt a strange detachment, like a surgeon observing a procedure. I wasn't happy. There is no happiness in watching your family implode. But there was a grim satisfaction in the truth. The infection had been lanced. It was ugly, and it was bleeding, but at least the poison was out. My mother walked over to me. She moved slowly, navigating around the spilled beer and the overturned chairs. She reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were cold and clammy. "Lauren," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, we can't. We can't let this get out. If the neighbors know, if the bank presses charges, it will destroy him. It will destroy us." She squeezed my hand, falling back into the old rhythm, the old dance steps she knew so well. "We can handle this inside the house," she pleaded. "Your father and I, we can sell the boat. We can cover the loan you co-signed. I mean, the one he signed for you. We can make it right. But please, don't call the police. Don't file the fraud report. He is your brother. Family is all we have." She looked at me with those wet, imploring eyes that had manipulated me for decades. She was asking me to swallow the grenade again. She was asking me to absorb the blast so the family portrait on the mantel wouldn't crack. I looked down at her hand gripping mine. I remembered the camera footage. I remembered her laughing as she slapped the sticky note on my library door. She won't dare make a scene. I gently but firmly pulled my hand away from hers. "No," I said. My mother blinked, stunned. "What?" "You are confusing family with ownership," I said softly. "You think that because we share blood, you own my peace. You think you own my finances. You think you own my silence. You think that being a family means I am required to set myself on fire to keep Ethan warm." I stepped back, putting distance between us. "I am done burning, Mom." "Lauren, please," she cried. "He made a mistake." "He committed a crime," I corrected her. "Several crimes. Against me, against you, against the bank." Ethan, seeing that his mother's tears were not working their usual magic, decided to switch tactics. He lunged forward, stopping just short of me, his face twisted in a snarl of pure entitlement. "You are enjoying this, aren't you?" he spat. "You are loving this. Little Miss Perfect finally gets to stomp on her screw-up brother. You get to play the hero." "I am not a hero, Ethan," I said. "I am a victim who decided to stop lying down." "You are killing me!" he shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "If you report this, I go to jail. I lose everything. My reputation, my future. You are literally killing my life. How can you do that to your own brother?" The accusation hung there, heavy and dramatic. It was designed to pierce my heart, to make me feel like the aggressor. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had measured my walls while I was away, who had planned to erase my existence in my own home, who had gambled my credit rating on a pipe dream. "I am not killing you. Ethan," I said, my voice steady, calm, and final. I pointed to the unplugged ring lights. I pointed to the red envelope on the table. I pointed to the camera mounted in the corner of the ceiling. "I am just turning on the lights." Ethan stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. There was no rebuttal to that. "You have been operating in the dark for a long time," I continued. "You have been hiding in the shadows of Mom and Dad's denial. You have been hiding behind my silence. All I did was flip the switch. If you don't like what you see in the mirror now that the room is bright, that is not my fault." I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the red envelope. I held it like a shield. "Now," I said, "the party is over. The guests are gone. The live stream is off." I looked at my parents, then at Ethan. "It is time to talk about the lease, or rather, the lack of one." The house settled into a profound quiet. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. A car drove by outside, its headlights sweeping across the ceiling for a brief second before disappearing. It was a heavy silence. It was the sound of illusions dying. It was the sound of a family realizing that the glue that had held them together, the lies, the enabling, the scapegoating, had dissolved. Ethan slumped back against the wall, sliding down to the floor again. He pulled his knees to his chest, looking small and defeated. My parents stood apart from each other, islands of regret in a sea of wreckage. I stood in the center of my living room. It was messy. It was scarred. It smelled like stale beer, but for the first time in weeks, it felt like mine. The ring lights were dark. The music was dead. The last of the strangers had vanished into the night, leaving behind the sticky residue of spilled alcohol and the heavy, suffocating silence of a family that had finally run out of lies. My father was staring at the floor. My mother was weeping into a paper napkin she had found on the counter. Ethan was still slumped against the wall, looking like a deflated balloon. I walked over to the dining table, pushed aside a pyramid of empty red cups, and laid the red envelope down flat. Next to it, I placed a new document, a thin stapled packet I had pulled from my briefcase. "You asked me why I didn't call," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet room. "You asked why I didn't warn you. You said it was cruel to let you set all this up just to tear it down." I looked at them, meeting each of their gazes in turn. "I didn't call because I needed you to commit," I said. "I needed you to be so comfortable in your violation of my boundaries that you wouldn't be able to deny it later. I needed the measurements. I needed the tape on the walls. I needed the loans signed in my name. I needed the attempted transfer from the retirement account." "Lauren, please," my mother sniffled. "We get it. We messed up." "No," I said. "You didn't mess up. You executed a plan. And now, I am executing mine." I tapped the new document on the table. "I didn't just spend the last 2 days gathering evidence," I said. "I spent them with a lawyer. This is not a suggestion. This is a binding legal agreement." My father looked up, his eyes narrowing. "A legal agreement? Between family?" "Between a victim and her abusers," I corrected him. "This document outlines a permanent separation of assets. It states that you acknowledge the debt Ethan fraudulently accrued in my name, and you, Mom and Dad, agree to assume full liability for it using the equity in your own home." "Our home?" my mother gasped. "Lauren, that is our security." "And my credit rating was mine," I said. "You broke it. You bought it." I flipped the page. "It also includes a strict non-access clause. You are to surrender your keys to this house immediately. You are not allowed on this property without my express written invitation. If you show up unannounced, if I see you on the camera measuring my walls again, I will file for an immediate restraining order using the footage I recorded tonight as primary evidence." "You would put a restraining order on your parents?" my father asked, his voice shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. "Think about the shame. Lauren, think about what people will say. The scandal would destroy our reputation in this town." "The reputation of this family," I said, gesturing to the beer-stained floor, "was already destroyed the moment you let your son turn my living room into a frat house. You want to talk about honor? You want to talk about dignity? Dignity is not stealing from your daughter to fund your son's delusions." I leaned in close. "If you sign this, the video files stay on my hard drive. The police report for identity theft does not get filed. We handle this quietly, but if you walk out that door without signing, I send the entire packet to the district attorney tomorrow morning." Ethan scrambled up from the floor. He looked desperate, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. "Lauren, come on," he pleaded, putting on his best puppy dog face. "I will pay it back. I promise. I will get a job. I will work double shifts. I will pay back every cent of the loan. You don't need to drag Mom and Dad's house into this. Just give me 6 months. I can fix this." I looked at him. It was tragic, really. He still thought he was negotiating. "You will pay it back?" I asked. "With what money, Ethan?" "I told you, I will work—" "No," I interrupted. "I mean, what bank account are you going to use?" He frowned. "My checking account, the one at the credit union." "The one I opened for you when you were 18? I asked. "The one where I'm listed as the custodian?" His face went pale. "I closed it this morning," I said. "You what?" I removed myself as the custodian, and then I flagged the account for suspicious activity based on the fraudulent loan deposit. I said calmly. The bank has frozen the assets pending an investigation. You can't access a dime. And the credit cards? I continued. The ones you use as authorized user on my account? Cancelled. The phone plan? Cancelled. The car insurance? I removed you from the policy effective at midnight tonight. You can't do that, Ethan screamed. How am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to get around? You are stranding me. I am not stranding you, I said. I am emancipating you. You wanted to be a self-made man. Ethan, you wanted to be a big-shot entrepreneur. Well, congratulations. You are now completely independent. No safety net, no sister to bail you out. Just you and the world. My mother looked horrified. Lauren, he won't survive. He doesn't know how to manage. Then he will learn, I snapped. Or he won't. But I am done paying the tuition for lessons he refuses to take. I looked at the three of them. For years. I had held them up. I had been the pillar, the foundation, the silent support system that allowed them to play their games without ever hitting the ground. I thought that if I just held on a little longer, if I just gave a little more, they would eventually appreciate the effort. But you cannot build a house on a sinkhole. You just lose the house. There is one last thing, I said. I walked past them, down the hallway, toward the back of the house, toward the room with the pink sticky note on the door. They followed me, drawn by the gravity of the moment. I stopped in front of the door. The note my mother had written, storage, was still there. I reached out and ripped it off, crumbling the paper in my fist. I opened the door. The room was dark. I flipped the switch. The soft, warm light illuminated my sanctuary. My books were still on the shelves, though some had been shoved aside to make room for measuring tapes. My velvet chair was pushed into a corner. You wanted to give this room to Ethan, I said. You called it wasted space. You said I didn't need it because I didn't have a family to fill it. I walked into the room and ran my hand along the spine of a vintage novel. This room is not empty, I said. It is full of the person I fought to become. It is full of the peace I earned. It is full of the one thing you people have never respected, my privacy. I turned to face them. This is not a guest room. This is not a storage unit. And it is certainly not a gaming den for a 30-year-old thief. This is my home, and no one has the right to redesign my life without my permission. My father looked at me. For the first time, I didn't see disappointment in his eyes. I saw fear. He realized that the dynamic had flipped. He wasn't the head of the household anymore. He was a guest who had overstayed his welcome. Sign the papers, I said, pointing back toward the living room. And then get out. They signed. It took 10 minutes. My father's hand shook as he put his signature on the liability agreement. My mother cried the entire time, her tears leaving wet spots on the paper. But she signed. Ethan signed last. He didn't look at me. He just scribbled his name, the name he had tried to weaponize against me, and threw the pen down on the table. I hope you are happy, Ethan muttered as he walked to the door. I hope being right keeps you warm at night. It does, I said. It is much warmer than being used. They left. My mother tried to hug me at the door, but I stepped back. I wasn't ready for that. Maybe I never would be. She looked at me with a broken expression, then turned and walked out to the car. I watched them drive away. I watched the taillights of my father's car, and the taillights of the rental car Ethan had to call because I wouldn't let him drive the one I paid for, disappear down the street. I closed the front door. I locked the deadbolt. I engaged the chain. I set the alarm. The house was quiet. I walked back into the living room. It was a mess. There were muddy footprints on the rug. There were empty cups on every surface. The air smelled stale. But it was my mess. I didn't go to sleep. I couldn't. Instead, I started to clean. I put on my own music, soft jazz, not the thumping bass of the party. I picked up every red cup. I wiped down the counters. I dragged the furniture back to its original position. I took the tape off the walls, carefully peeling it back so it wouldn't damage the paint. It took me 3 hours. By the time I was finished, it was 4 in the morning. My muscles ached, my eyes were burning, but the house looked like mine again. I made a cup of tea and sat in my velvet armchair in the library. I looked around the room. It was safe. It was quiet. For years, I had told myself that keeping the peace was the highest form of love. I thought that swallowing my anger, paying the bills, and nodding along to their delusions was what a good daughter did. I thought that if I didn't make a sound, I was being strong. I was wrong. I took a sip of the hot tea. I used to think that not making a scene was love. Now I know the truth. Not making a scene just lets people get comfortable with disrespecting you. Silence isn't noble. It is just a vacuum that allows others to fill your life with their noise. I had finally made a sound, and it was the most beautiful sound in the world. It was the sound of a door closing and locking from the inside. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I know family drama can be intense, especially when it involves boundaries and finances, and I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from right now? Are you tuning in from your kitchen, your car, or maybe your own quiet sanctuary? Please let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please make sure to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who need to hear it. Stay strong and protect your peace.